Find somewhere comfortable. There is no need to sit up straight, no need to keep your eyes open. Let your body settle into wherever you are right now. The weight of the day can go. Just set it down. You don't need to follow closely tonight. You don't need to remember any of this. The words will come and they will pass. And that is perfectly fine. Some of them might reach you, and some might drift by unheard. And both of those things are welcome here. We are going to travel somewhere tonight. Somewhere old and vast and quiet. A place that existed long before the world moved at the speed it does now. A place where journeys were measured not in hours, but in seasons. Where the night sky was the only map that mattered. There is no hurry. There is nowhere to be. Just the sound of the words, arriving softly, one after another. Breathe. We are going to follow a road that no longer exists in the way it once did. A road that was never really one road at all. A road that carried silk and spice and ideas and faith across the slow belly of the world. We begin. There is something quietly wonderful in the fact that the Silk Road was, for most of its history, a road you could not see. It was not paved. It was not marked. It was not a single path at all, but a loose and shifting web of routes, stretching across Central Asia, from China in the east to the Mediterranean in the west. Thousands of miles of steppe and mountain and desert. A network that grew the way rivers grow, not by design, but by use, by repetition, by the patient pressure of human feet and camel hooves over centuries. And most of the travelling happened at night. This is the thing worth settling into this evening. The image we tend to carry of the Silk Road is a daytime one. Bright sun, coloured textiles, merchants in busy bazaars. But the people who actually moved along those routes, who covered the real distances, who carried the goods from one civilization to another, they moved in the dark. The deserts were the reason. The great deserts of Central Asia, the Taklamakan, the Karakum, the Gobi in its western reaches. These were places where the daytime heat could stop a caravan entirely, where the air itself became an obstacle. So the caravans learned, over generations, to rest when the sun was high, and to walk when it had gone. Let that settle. A caravan leaving a city might set out in the last hour of the afternoon, once the worst of the heat had begun to ease. By dusk, they would be moving properly. By full dark, they would be deep in the rhythm of travel, the camels padding forward with that slow, unhurried gait that covers distance so quietly, so patiently, that it seems almost like stillness. The stars were the compass. The route was known not by landmarks, but by celestial ones. Traders and their guides would watch the fixed patterns overhead and navigate by them the way sailors navigated by the same stars over open water. The sky was vast and ancient and reliable. It did not change with the seasons the way the ground did. It did not shift with the winds. The stars rose and set in the same patient arcs they had traced for thousands of years before any human foot touched that sand. Breathe. And then, somewhere out in that deep darkness, there would be a caravanserai. The word is Persian. Roughly, it means a palace for caravans. And while not all of them were palaces, the idea behind them was generous and ancient. Every day or two along the major routes, a traveller could find one. A walled compound, usually square, with a single arched entrance wide enough to admit a loaded camel. Inside, a courtyard open to the sky. Around the edges, small rooms for sleeping, a well, or a cistern, or sometimes a fountain if the caravanserai was prosperous enough. Space for the animals. A place to sleep and eat and wait. Some of these buildings still stand. Their walls are worn to soft edges by the wind, the plaster long gone, the courtyard open to whatever weather passes through. But they still hold their shape, rectangular, patient, solid in the way that things built to last tend to be solid, not imposing, but simply there. The way an old tree is simply there. You may have drifted. That is fine. At night, a caravanserai would have been a particular kind of quiet. The animals settled and fed, the fires burning low. Travellers from different directions gathered in the same place, some of them speaking languages the others had never heard. Chinese merchants resting alongside Persian traders, Byzantine pilgrims near Sogdian middlemen who had learned, over the centuries, to speak almost any language the route required. The Sogdians are worth a gentle moment of attention. They were a people from what is now Uzbekistan, and for several centuries they were the great quiet engine of Silk Road trade. Not emperors, not conquerors, merchants and intermediaries, moving goods and letters, and, it turned out, ideas along routes they knew better than anyone. Letters have been found, written on paper and preserved in the dry air of a desert watchtower. Letters home from Sogdian merchants stuck far out along the route, writing to their families, complaining about bad debts and unreliable partners, and the difficulty of getting goods moving again after a road became unsafe. There is something very human in those letters, the handwriting across centuries, the same anxieties, patient and familiar. We continue softly. What moved along these routes at night was not only silk. Silk was the famous cargo, the one that gave the road its name, though that name was only invented in the 19th century by a German geographer. At the time, no one called it the Silk Road. They simply called it the road, or the route, or they named the specific section they were travelling. But silk was certainly there. Chinese silk was prized across the ancient world in a way that is difficult to fully imagine now. It was light enough to pack densely, valuable enough to justify the enormous cost of transport, and it could not be made anywhere else. Not for centuries. Not until the methods were eventually carried westward by travellers and pilgrims and, in one quiet story, by monks who concealed silkworm eggs inside hollow walking staffs. Alongside the silk went glassware, coming east from Rome and Persia, spices from India, horses going west from Central Asia, horses of a size and quality that Chinese emperors wanted badly enough to send entire military expeditions to obtain. Lapis lazuli from the mines of Afghanistan, that deep blue stone that appears in ancient Egyptian artifacts and medieval European paintings alike, travelling slowly over generations from a single mountain range in the Hindu Kush. And alongside all of that, travelling even more slowly and even more quietly, went something that left no trace in the archaeological record for a long time. Ideas, religions, ways of understanding the world. There is no rush. Buddhism is one of the great quiet travellers of the Silk Road. It moved from northern India into Central Asia and then into China, not through conquest, but through contact. Monks walked alongside merchants. Monasteries appeared at the edges of routes, places of rest and water. And, gradually, teaching. The art that developed along the Buddhist routes of Central Asia is extraordinary. Cave temples carved into cliffsides. The interiors painted with images that blend Indian, Persian, Chinese and Greek influences in ways that should not work, but somehow do. Because everything on the Silk Road was a mixture. Nothing arrived unchanged. The Chinese pilgrim Xuanzang travelled the route in the 7th century, going west from China into India to collect Buddhist texts. He walked and rode for years. He crossed deserts and mountain ranges that would have stopped most people entirely. He kept records of everything he saw, the cities, the monasteries, the populations, the climate. His account is still read. It is still one of the clearest windows into what Central Asia looked like before the world changed around it. He would have travelled through nights like these, dark and vast and full of stars. The cold of the desert night pressing in from every direction. The sound of his own footsteps and the footsteps of whoever was travelling alongside him. The distant flicker of a caravanserai light somewhere ahead on the flat, dark plain. Just the sound of the words. The road slowly quieted over the centuries. Not all at once. Not on any particular night. But the sea routes grew safer and more reliable, and the overland journeys grew less practical, and the cities that had flourished along the routes began to thin out. Some of them were swallowed by the desert entirely, buried under sand, waiting. Archaeologists have been finding them slowly, carefully, like someone brushing dust from an old photograph. Buried cities in the Tarim Basin, frescoes preserved for 1,000 years in the dry air of sealed caves. Coins from a dozen different civilizations scattered across the same abandoned floor. A caravanserais, still standing at the edge of a desert. No modern road crosses. All of it so patient, so still, so ancient. The road was always at its heart, a human thing. Not an infrastructure project or a trade policy, but simply the accumulated weight of people deciding, over and over across centuries, to move, to carry something from one place to another, to make contact with whoever lived on the other side of the desert, the mountain, the vast, indifferent steppe. And most of that movement happened in the quiet dark, under the same stars, at the same slow, unhurried pace that distance requires when there is no other option. Let that settle. There is something restful in imagining it. The caravan finding its rhythm in the first cool hours after sunset. The camels patient. The merchants half awake, half dreaming, carried forward by the gentle momentum of the road. The stars overhead doing what they have always done, arcing slowly from east to west, measuring the night in their ancient and indifferent way. The world was large and dark and full of distance. And somehow, despite all of that, the ideas still travelled. The silk still arrived. The lapis lazuli still made its way from a single Afghan mountain to a painter's workshop in medieval Florence, where someone dipped a brush in it and made the sky that blue particular shade that still catches the eye across 7 centuries. The road carried all sleep well